In 3, 2, and you... Okay, guys, welcome to the first session, the first webinar session on foster workplace learning. We're going to be taking you through the very first section of the learning materials and learning activity, which is section 1, create learning opportunities. Now, this actually relates to the unit of competence if we look at the study overview, which is develop a workplace learning environment. So that's subject and unit of competence all in one. And so by the end of this session, guys, you'll have all the information that you need to successfully answer. There's 14 questions in that first learning activity in section 1, create learning opportunities. So we'll take you through that. Yeah, Alex, is there anything to add before we get started?
No, I think I'm ready to go. Obviously, there is 14 questions in this session, or in this particular learning activity, so don't be put off too much. There's a few questions in there that do rely on bringing your personal experiences into play a little bit. So, you know, obviously have a little bit of a think about how this, the process of learning does directly affect you and, you know, some of the experiences you've had with learning recently. And yeah, so that's probably just the only thing. Don't be put off by the 14 questions.
Yeah, there's a few different sort of things here. So we get the guys to answer a couple of questions. Now, the learning materials are really solid here, guys. So do refer to the learning materials if you're having any troubles answering some of the questions as well, because they are definitely very, very thorough in this particular section. So there shouldn't be anything that pops out that you're not really sure on how to answer. Obviously, we're going to go through it now. And as Alyssa just mentioned, it gives you the opportunity as well to engage with the material a little bit yourself, sort of reflect on, you know, I guess to reflect on the way that you do things and some programs and some learning environments that you've participated in, and gets you to reflect a little bit on it as well at the end too. So I think 3 or 4 of the questions at the end are really self-reflective answers. So yeah, so it's not too heavy. Let's jump straight into it, shall we?
I think we definitely should jump straight into it.
The beautiful thing. Ready when you're ready. Would you like me to read the first question?
Yeah. So just before we start, I guess the first series of learning activities is all about creating, you know, creating learning opportunities. So I guess that's probably the very first stage here. As we go through the other stages, when we look at the other learning material or the learning activities, they obviously follow a process when it comes to fostering that learning environment, but that very first step is all about creating learning opportunities. So in an organisation, I guess one of the most important things is to be able to create those opportunities, but to really essentially know what kind of learning opportunities are needed and really who your team are so that you can essentially provide the right opportunities for the right people. And foster those areas and strengthen those areas where, you know, they're already strong, but give them a little bit more strength, and then work on areas where there's areas for opportunity or development in your team members. So that's that.
Absolutely. So this first section of this does look at, you know, really what learning is all about and how to sort of, you know, how to create those opportunities or how to work out what your organisation may need, really, which is a good starting point. And then, as you mentioned, the second section, third section moves on to how to actually promote it and facilitate it, so how to run those sessions and how to, you know, just keep a track and monitor it, keep evaluating the effectiveness of those programs that you put into place. So this is a really good starting point. As you mentioned, some nice synergy between those 3 sections. Let's have a look at the very first one.
Look at that very first question, which obviously is actually quite fitting and a quite nice introductory question, which is really basically asking you to describe what learning is. Okay, yep. So I guess that's really what we want to see. You know, learning is quite a descriptive word, and it entails quite a bit. So we'd be looking for quite an extensive answer here. But all we really want you to do is describe what learning is. What is learning? Okay.
Yep.
What is it about? And we could probably talk about it. I guess for different people it can mean very different things. But you know, learning is really about growth and development, improvement, and you know, the processes to be able to promote that growth and the opportunities and development too.
The learning materials actually refer to learning as a description as as changing the way that we think, really. And that's a really interesting way of sort of looking at it. Changing the way we think. And the learning material actually gives you an example. It talks about a baby. It talks about a baby when a baby sees like a 50-cent coin or a 20-cent coin. And what does the baby do? They grab the coin and they put it in their mouth, or they play with it, or they see it in a completely different way to what an adult might see that coin. The adult might see that coin as a representation of things that they can purchase with it, or a completely different thing. So, really learning is just is that process of changing the way that we think. So at some point, that baby will have changed the way they respond to that stimulus of the coin, and that's the learning that we're talking about. I mean, learning is effectively the acquisition of skill or knowledge. And I sort of like to talk about it as, really bridging the gap between, the unknown and the known in many ways as well. That's another way of sort of explaining it. Yeah, I'd actually, if you'd like, Alyssa, I'd actually like to sort of discuss, there's something that I always like to talk about when I talk about learning with students. I can do a really quick version of it, just talk about sort of the stages of learning.
Mm-hmm.
There's a few clear steps that everybody has to go through. This is sort of a fascinating thing. It's, we talk about, well, I mentioned learning being the acquisition of a new skill or knowledge, but really it is bridging the gap between what you don't know and then obviously having that knowledge. So I'd actually just like to talk through some of the stages of learning. The reality is that everybody, it doesn't matter how old you are, it doesn't matter what level of experience and what field that you're in, if you are going through a learning process, then you will go through these 4 steps, depending on the environment, depending on what you're actually learning, depending on your background, depending on a number of factors. It may happen very quickly, or it may take a long period of time, and it also depends on what it is you learn. Some things obviously take a lot longer to learn than others. You can learn how to flick a light switch on and off pretty quickly, so you might actually go through those stages incredibly fast, but then there are other things which are obviously going to take a lot of time. So I'm going to just quickly go through this as quickly as I can, because I just think it's a good little setup to a few other things here. So the very first stage of learning is actually not being aware of anything. I call it unconscious. I actually write this, and we're looking at my screen today, so I'm going to just write this in here. Unconscious, let's get that wrong, not knowing. Okay, so the first stage is unconscious not knowing. So at this point, this is really before you start the learning process. You're unaware of the information, and you're unconscious of the information as well. So it's not in your way of thinking. You're not thinking about it. You're unaware. You don't know the information, but you're also unaware of what you don't know. So a good example is before we, I guess before you go and get your license and start practicing learning how to drive, you're unaware of all of the information. In terms of you're unaware of what it is you need to know in terms of driving, but at this point, you're also unconscious of, you're not aware, you're unconscious of this information. So you don't know how to drive, but you're also unconscious of what that information is. Now this is actually a pretty good state. It's a pretty happy state. You're unaffected at this point. Most people that are in this state can't wait to start driving, can't wait to get their license, and feeling really good. Now the next stage, what happens is you go and you book yourself in and get a couple of lessons on how to drive. Now what happens here is it becomes a conscious state of not knowing. So we still don't know how to drive, because this is just lesson number 1. So that the instructor tells us, okay, you need to learn how to use the clutch, you need to how to look in your rearview mirror, you need to how to, all of these road rules that are just now we're confronted by. So now we are aware of all of this stuff that we do not know. We are consciously aware of all this information that we just haven't worked out yet. This is not a happy state. This is actually a pretty uncomfortable state, because we're feeling like, oh, there's a lot of stuff there. There's a lot of stuff I have to deal with here. Now, actually, interestingly enough, what happens next is that we spend a lot of time practicing those things that we've just been taught, and it's in our mind. We move into that stage of knowing. So we've learned all of that information, and it's consciously in our mind. So, imagine when that first day that you drove by yourself, got your license, and you started driving by yourself, and you're talking through everything in your head. Okay, so he's turning left, I'm going to turn right, so I'll wait, he's going to go, is he going to go, no, I'm going down now, look at the rearview mirror, left hand, right foot, clutch, down. So what's happening at this point is that you overthink everything. Everything is sort of in that conscious place where you're thinking about everything. You know the information, but you don't know it perfectly well yet. You're just in that stage where everything is just, and that's actually not a happy stage either, because you're overthinking things, and it's actually quite tiresome, that stage. The very last stage, and this is, and as I say, these are the steps everybody is still unconscious. There we go. No. All right, forget it. How do you spell unconscious?
It's not, yeah, unconscious. Like,
No?
yeah, the third one, but unconscious. Yeah, there's an S missing after the N.
There we go.
That should be, yep.
Beautiful.
There you go.
And same up here too, that's what it is. Okay, great. Thank you. That's not right. That's okay. Okay, so unconscious mind. So what happens after you've been driving a car for many years is you get in the car and you drive. You don't think about changing gears. You don't think about, preparation leading up to an intersection. What should I be doing? Should I be slowing down, moving gears up? It just happens. Now this is the only other happy state. So we talk about happy and unhappy states. Right at the start, before we did anything, before we had our first lesson, was really happy. Right at the end, once everything is sorted, we were happy. Everything in between is not. I think it's just important for students to be aware that's just stages of learning, and that's what happens. And we talk about being a bridge between the unknown and the known, and that's really what happens. So I guess I just sort of wanted to highlight that a little bit. And it's important to know as well, because what happens in stages 2 and 3 is that these are the stages of what we, these are the stages of uncertainty. We're not 100% with our actions. We're learning something new. We've just sort of learned something new. We're trying it out. It's consciously in our mind. There's a stage of uncertainty here. And, when people feel uncertain, it's not always a good feeling. You worry, you've got anxiety, you start feeling tired. It comes with a lot of physical effects. You might get butterflies in your stomach. Your heart rate might go up. You might feel nauseated. You might get sweaty palms, headaches, all of those sorts of things. And it actually very strongly relates to our body chemistry at that point in time. Now, there's also a connection between those stages and I don't know if I should get sort of too deep into conversation about body chemistry. I might not do so. But look, I guess it's important for people to know that these are some of the reasons why people have had, I guess, bad experiences with learning before, because they've gone through these states and they're wanting to walk away from it. We talk about fight and flight. If a tiger jumped out while you're walking down the street, that uncertainty about what would happen would create that whole fight and flight response. And quite often when we get that fight and flight response is that blood rushes down to our major muscle groups, and our ability to think clearly and logically diminishes, and we just have to act. And quite a lot of the time what happens is when people are in that state of uncertainty or feeling uncomfortable, we go back to this sort of a feeling of fight and flight, and some people take the flight option and go, you know what, it's too hard, I don't want to do it anymore. They may not know why they don't want to do it anymore, they just don't want to do it anymore. So it's just important to be aware of that, A, for yourself, but also B, in context of this subject, we're talking about creating a learning environment for our employees and for the organisation. It's really important to understand how people react to learning and to change as well in general. Picture yourself in the garden, and out of the corner of the eye you think you see a snake, and you get a quick shock, and then you have a good look and you realise it was just a garden hose. But for some reason you just don't really feel like doing any more gardening. You've had enough. And this is sort of what's actually happening there, is that your body, that uncertainty, has triggered those, those physical reactions that we were talking about before, whether it's, your heart rate goes up, whether you get anxiety, whether you start to sweat. And, it's not a good feeling, and so you really want to remove yourself from that feeling at times. And so this is what happens in the learning process. It's just important to know that people go through that. People have a lot of anxiety about change and learning and things like that too. So yeah, I just thought I'd share that, and just in reference to, I guess, the learning process and being aware of those things. There's something in the material, I'm just going to have a bit of a quick flick through that talked about, okay, yeah, barriers. It was a really good section here, and I thought this relates to this. So there are many reasons why individual teams or organizations do not embrace learning. These include a reluctance to change, inconclusive deliberations, urgency of tasks, avoidance and of reflective observation, unclear concepts, uncertainness of outcomes, fear of failure. That's a really, common one. Defensive routines. That's another one too. Complexity of systems, and so it goes on. There's a few there, but it's really just important to understand how people, have a lot of barriers towards these sorts of things. You've got to be quite sensitive, I guess, when you're, engaging people in these processes too. So, yeah, Alyssa, did you want to continue on from that point?
Yeah, and just obviously, I guess when we're talking about things like creating learning opportunities, obviously knowing how humans work and, knowing who your team members are and what their learning styles are, and I guess if there are any barriers to learning and development should all be factored into consideration before you start to actually facilitate and implement those learning opportunities. So it's really important to obviously consider who your people are before you, in your decision to be able to create these opportunities for them. Everybody's very different, everybody's very unique, and everybody learns very, very differently. So I guess the important thing is to know who the person is that is sitting in front of you or you are working with, and designing a program around what they need. Okay, so that's why, obviously those barriers to learning are extremely important and definitely need consideration.
Yep. And be aware of these stages that I've just highlighted here. Be very aware of them, because that's what everybody's going through. It's an uncomfortable thing. It's going to trigger a lot of that uncertainty. It's going to trigger some of those sort of physiological responses. And for the most part, it's the unknown, which is what creates that. So, the best thing that somebody can do if they're sort of creating that learning environment is really just clear up everything. Clear up the whole process, clear up exactly what's to be expected, why we're doing what we're doing. Let somebody know exactly what they're about to go through. Give them as much information as they can, and that'll actually help to relax them and allow them to be a part of that process a lot better. So, yeah. Okay, I might just move on to the next one.
Right, perfect.
So I read it. Yep.
Yeah.
Good.
All right, that second question. Yeah, sorry.
You're right, go for it.
Give an example of a personal learning experience that you have had recently. Describe what it was that you learned, how you learned it, and how easy or difficult it was to learn. So everybody out there, hopefully you've got some kind of personal experience that you've had over the last little while where you've taken something from it. And as Adam mentioned, maybe your thought process about something changed. Maybe the way you did something changed to be more efficient or more productive. Perhaps if you're struggling to find an option, you could always consider this course. I mean, this course is hopefully a learning experience for you, and you just have to discuss about what it is that you've learned in this course, how you learned it, and how easy or difficult it was to learn. So hopefully everybody out there will have some kind of example that they can draw on to be able to answer this question.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. And look, I think for me, part of this question is sort of understanding that, sometimes it is difficult. And as sort of I described before, and that's part of the reasons why. It's not, we're dealing with this uncertainty, and it's the uncertainty which is hard to handle. So, and it depends on what it is that we're learning, obviously, because different things are, require different levels, and we can progress through those stages a lot quicker. But it's important to know that it's not always comfortable, and if you are sort of feeling like you just want to remove yourself and get out, then quite often there's something else that's going on there, and just be aware of that. But yeah, look, it may not be comfortable, it may not be good, but this is just a self-reflection activity for you guys. And Alyssa, I think you mentioned to me earlier that you're happy for you guys to use their own experience in terms of running through this course, in terms
Absolutely.
of,
if you are struggling, if you are struggling to find a personal learning experience that you've had, definitely embrace or definitely use this course, because hopefully this course is a personalised learning experience for you. Um, don't forget, it is a good resource to draw on to be able to actually think about how you've learned, what you've learned, the processes you've learned or you've used to be able to learn. So this could be definitely a good opportunity for you to review your course if you are having difficulty identifying personal learning.
Look, I would prefer if the guys actually used an example where it wasn't straightforward, it wasn't easy, because it's much more of a reflective example of what others might go through and what we're really hoping you to do here. So instead of saying, oh yeah, I just that was really easy, that's cool. But I would actually rather you say, look, this is an example where I couldn't get at something, and then my feedback was such that I actually needed to do something else, and this is the things that I did in order to get to where I need to be. So we'd rather see a bit of a process explained rather than saying, oh, well, I just knew it straight away. And so give us a bit of a process, that would be more what we're kind of looking for there.
Yep.
Okay.
Lovely.
Question number 3. So question 3, sorry, we're on my screen again. I keep forgetting. Question number 3 talks about a learning organisation. It asks students to describe what a learning organisation is. Alyssa, do you want to take the lead on this one?
Yeah, of course. Now, I think that you can definitely have what people perceive as a traditional learning organisation, where the products and services that an organisation might provide would be, learning opportunities for people. However, I think what's a good thing to consider is that any organisation can also be a learning organisation. I think a learning organisation is about, culturally, whether or not you really look at the skills and you look at the development process and you look about changing the way your team members think, and you've got processes and you've got opportunities in place to really embrace those types of things. And so I think rather than think about it from a traditional perspective, as in an organisation that gives training or provides training services or learning opportunities, every organisation can be a learning organisation. As long as they've got a culture that really encourages and that the opportunity to grow, learn and develop and become more innovative, and they've got processes and their vision is focused on development and supporting mechanisms as well. So I think I would like to see something a little bit more focused around defining a learning organisation in terms of culture.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. For me, the word that just jumps out when I think about this question is the word commitment, because an organisation that has a commitment to learning is one that's put things in place. So you can actually see, you can really quickly you can see an organisation that appears to be a learning organisation versus one that isn't. And it's quite often the structures that they put in place in terms of their, like having a training coordinator or a training department, having an area which is specialised on, on focusing on those internal development opportunities. Now, some organisations do this really well, and some are really quite poor at it. Yeah, look, I guess organisations that have many different functions, many different departments, many different roles, and a lot of movement as well tend to sort of do these things really well. There's obviously a financial reward for organisations to, I guess we'll explain this in the next question too, because it talks about some of the advantages of it, so maybe we'll leave it there. But there are clear financial rewards for organisations that do, because they can upskill their staff, they can essentially move people around between roles and minimise how much they need to spend on recruiting, and their retention rates are better and things like that too. But I guess we'll start to get into that in the next one.
Yeah.
Did you want to share any examples or any experience that you've had in organisations that you feel are committed?
Well, I think there's a big trend now in terms of things like strategic planning and strategic functions and direction of an organisation to really look at the development and the growth area of their team members, because I think there is definitely a move to understanding that the human resource is probably an area where you can really develop, which will build relationships with clients, customers, which is what is essentially the strength of an organisation. So quite often you're now starting to see values, systems in place that definitely align and support the concept of learning and recognising really the importance of it. So traditionally it used to be always a cost to an organisation, but I think people are looking at more so the long-term gain of these types of things, especially in a skills shortage now. You know, we've got to look after our team members and we've got to give them opportunities so they stay with us. And people do want to be developed and people do want to have those opportunities and they will give you the commitment back. So you are seeing a lot of that alignment now, which is really nice, I think, from a strategic perspective. Yeah.
You know, for me, it's a big deal. Like when you're in an organisation that really cares enough about you to help you with your development and to want to upskill you, and when you come to work and there's that bit of excitement. Oh, say we're doing a half day of training. It's actually going to be a bit of a fun day. So you kind of get excited about coming into work, and you're feeling really good about the fact that the organisation is caring enough about you to want to help you and improve your skills as well. And I think that's a really big deal. Like, so those non-intangible, those things that you can't really sort of quantify, that value that's really hard to sort of see on a spreadsheet or a report is there in terms of what what your employees are going to get out of it, just feeling like they're important. So it's one way to put all these fancy words up and say this is our mission statement and these are our values, and that's all very nice, well and good. But sometimes you need to actually see some actions, and employees love to be a part of those sorts of things and to feel like they're considered as being important, and their development is important. I actually see my experience. I've had a bit of experience in working through call centres, and my experience is that the call centre environments typically are extremely high turnover environments. So people come and they go pretty quickly, and they're kind of high stress environments because you pick up and you take a lot of volume of calls, and you're dealing with customers, and you might have a lot of unhappy customers during the day, and so it's quite a high-end sort of role. Well, those sort of organisations are generally really good at continuing to upskill their staff and moving staff around and putting them into other areas of business, or trying to do so, at least looking for the good ones and moving them on into better roles, whether it be a quality control or a quality assurance department or into team leading sort of an area or some other sort of administrative role. So I'd say that those organisations tend to do well, and I think it's partially due to the fact that they have such a high turnover, and so it becomes a financial thing that they want to obviously retain their best staff, they want to give opportunity to the best staff to stick around, and they want the people that are in the front line and doing a lot of the work and picking up calls and speaking to customers to know that they're important and they're a part of the business, and that that they move on. Actually, one of the call centers that I worked in, their entire quality control department started on the phone. In fact, they only employed people in their quality control area that were previously working on the phone. Part of the reason was there was a lot of internal knowledge that was required to conduct that role, so that was important. But so what they would do is they would upskill people, and they would let them know that this is a logical pathway for you. If you keep working really hard and work towards your targets, and we'll keep upskilling you and giving you some additional training and mentorships and lots of things like this. And they transition staff into those roles really cleanly and clearly, and I just thought they did that particularly well. We're talking about, I guess, how to identify an organisation that's a learning organisation. Well, this organisation had a dedicated training area. They had a dedicated room for all of their internal training. They had a training manager, or a training coordinator, I think they were called, and they had a couple of other facilitators that would be there to do a range of different things, one-on-one coaching, floor walking, but also actual formal training sessions, so running workshops and actually delivering some additional content. So, and I thought it was really good because the training coordinator would actually come out and say, look, this is what we need to do. So it was planned, it was organised. You knew that you were going to be involved in it at some point. Now let's, I guess, go back to this question, which is talking about the advantages that business gain in being a learning organisation?
Mm.
Well, yeah, look, I think, we talked about, actually, I think yesterday, I don't know if this was a management or business subject the other day, but we talked about strategic directions, and we talked about the need to survive and to thrive in business. And I think in the world that we live in now, it's a global marketplace. The world is available to everybody. It's such a competitive environment that you need to have advantages wherever you can. And if some of those advantages are in your capabilities and what you're able to produce and do, and what your workers are effectively skilled at, then that's there's a business advantage there, and it's an incredibly important thing. What else? Another phenomenon that's happening in a lot of business is that we have this phenomenon happening where our corporate structure is being flattened. So instead of having this sort of pyramid scheme where you've got a pyramid scheme, but a pyramid structure where you have your management and underneath that, those sort of middle managers, you've got eons and eons of workers. We're now in an environment where everybody in the global marketplace, people want things now, and they want things efficiently, and they want things now. And to be able to provide that fast service, to provide things, your staff need to be empowered to be able to make more decisions. So previously with that old structure, there was a lot of bureaucracy, there's a lot of red tape, there's a lot of, I've got to go back to this manager, that manager, the other one. You've lost the business sale. So the businesses that were adaptable, flexible and quick were the ones that were adapting to the globalized marketplace better than other businesses. So one way for businesses to counter that and to be more adaptable and flexible and so forth is to upskill their staff and give their staff some more capability so that they can make some of those decisions so that the business can remain adaptable and flexible and can compete on that global stage. So, yeah. Alyssa, what other sort of advantage? Obviously, the financial advantage we talked about before in terms of retention of staff, and I mean, imagine a business that's far more skilled than, I guess, its competitor. What some of the, there's clearly some benefits to that. Do you want to add anything?
I think definitely just like starting it culturally, like employee satisfaction, employee engagement, culturally, employer of choice. I think all of those things are definitely going to provide a benefit for a business if they are a learning organisation. There's a lot of humanistic type of benefits that they can definitely gain. So yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of opportunities out there, and there are a lot of advantages to be identified. So I think we've named. I think we've gone into a bit of depth into those ones. So yeah.
Sounds good. So let's go on to the next question in that case. So question 5 is list some of the learning opportunities that you might observe taking place in a learning organisation. Mm-hmm. And so describe how they take place and how informal or formal they are. So there is a whole section in the learning material that talks about formal versus informal learning opportunities, and really it's all in there, guys. So have a look in there. I guess, and again, it's a variation on the theme because we've sort of talked about different methods of upskilling your staff members and doing those sorts of things. So again, this is just another variation on a theme there. But something that I guess what I'll mention is what are the drivers? So what are the initiators of learning? So what drives learning in an organisation? Well, probably there are many things. One of them is an organisational restructure. So when an organisation changes the way that it's structured up, then that actually drives the need to have learning within that organisation, because then things have changed. Also, when you've got a new product or a new service that's been launched, now this is straight out of learning materials, guys. The company is expanding or downsizing. Interestingly enough, when a company downsizes, the actual need or the skill set that the staff that are left need to possess is actually increased, because quite often what happens when you downsize is that those staff that are remaining take on a whole lot more responsibility. So expansion and downsizing is a driver for learning. Strategic change in the business. So businesses, okay, we're going to move into a whole new marketplace that we haven't dealt with before, haven't ventured in before. That's another driver for learning, because obviously you need to start upskilling yourself to meet the demands of that marketplace. If you've got a new competitor in the market, or if your competitor's doing something different that you've never done before that you think, wow, we need to keep up with this. So there's a need for us to start doing that. And probably the obvious one is that people would consider is, when you change jobs and change roles, there's obviously a need, and that's a driver for needing to learn. So this question is really asking, what are the different ways that you can do that, can learn. So I've given you the drivers and what I guess initiates that process happening. Just tell us some of the formal and informal ways. Yeah, so list them and then describe some and just mention whether they're formal or informal. I'm pretty happy with that. Alyssa, do you want to add anything to this, or have you got anything to say about that structure of those answers?
No, definitely not. I mean, like just list some of the opportunities, and then just as you mentioned, describe how they take place and whether or not they're formal or informal.
Yeah, sounds good.
Nice and.
Now we go on to a case study here. So there's a full question. I'm going to read the question, and Alyssa, do you want to start? Do you want to take the lead on this one?
Yep, definitely.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So here's a bit of a scenario for you guys. Really, the point of this is to sort of identify that clearly there's a need for learning through this scenario, and we need you guys to sort of talk us through how you would actually go about, putting it together. So this is a really important question here in the context of this entire unit. So I'll read through the scenario now. This is question 6. So you are the manager for a debt recovery section of a regional bank. The bank is experiencing unprecedented levels of customers defaulting on their loans as a result of international credit crisis, soaring house prices and rising petrol prices. The recent strategic decision made by the bank's board means the bank will reduce the leniency that it has previously shown for long-term customers and will now collect the loan securities as soon as they are defaulted. The board also decided to go ahead with implementation of a new IT system that will be deployed across the organisation in order to improve tracking and reporting. As a direct result, you have been given resources to hire an additional 10 collection agents, taking your team to 20. You are expecting that the existing team members will resist the change in the new IT system as they were actually heavily involved in the design of the current one. You are also expecting that the collection agents will be faced with personal stress as a result of increased workload and conflict with angry or upset customers. So now here what we're actually asking you is to describe the processes and tools that you will use to determine the learning and development requirements of the bank as an organisation, the debt recovery section, the existing team members, and the new employees, because there's different things that will happen at each of those stages.
And this,
in each of those areas.
Yeah, and this is a very, very big question. I mean, we've gone, and the last 5 questions have really all been focused on, the concept of learning, what it means, what a learning organisation is. So that's giving you the background and support knowledge around the whole concept of learning. So what this next stage does is it starts to get you to think about what tools and what processes you are now going to use to be able to start to think about creating the opportunities that you need, okay? Now, the resources do talk about a couple of different types of tools, and I guess for something like this, I'm looking for you to look at processes and tools, okay? So that's what I'm looking for. Now, the question obviously isn't an assessment-based question. So what we're doing is, I do need you to kind of it's hard to say to be brief, but because all the tools that you use are actually very, very good, powerful, strong tools that you'll use to be able to work through this type of scenario. I guess I kind of look at it in 3 stages there, Adam, and if you want to maybe just type some of the stages up, it might help the guys.
Sounds good to me.
I guess that very first stage is to be able to conduct what's called an organisational skills audit. Okay. Now, an organisational skills audit, or a skills audit in general, generally will tell you what needs you have, what needs there are that the whole bank needs. Okay, so what are the training skills, or what are the skills of the organisation that all of these people in the bank need? Okay, so I need to know what the skills are for, oops, where are we? I'm going back to the, yep, I'm just having
Sorry, you want me to go back?
Question, yep, that would be awesome. Okay, so I've got the bank as an organisation, I've got the debt recovery section, I've got my existing team members, and I've got my new employees. So essentially an organisational skills audit will tell me every single skill that is required for all of my team members. Okay, so it is breaking down everything that is required for them to be able to do their job. All right, so that's the very, very first session. That's the first kind of concept around doing a skill set. Okay.
So looking at the learning materials that we have in front of me, can you see the screen? I've actually blown up the learning materials on the screen here.
Yep.
So look, as it says here, the skills audit assess the current skill level.
So that's the second step of the skills audit. Okay.
Sorry.
So, yeah. So obviously, what you do is that very first step, and this is actually quite a long process to be able to do. It's quite simplified in the actual resource material itself, but obviously you want to determine what skills are required, and the next step is then to look at the team members and see currently where they are placed in terms of those skills. Okay?
Yeah.
So that's the second part of that process, because if you haven't determined what skills are required, then it's important, then there's no way that you're going to be actually able to determine whether or not people are actually meeting those requirements and where they're at.
So you look at the business direction, the strategic direction, what the business needs are, and then you determine what skills are required. That's the first part.
Yep.
Part two is then doing an analysis,
Yes. So looking at who your team members are, you've listed all your skills, okay, and hopefully your skills are aligned to the strategic direction, because hopefully you're a learning organisation and your values are embodied in your organisation. So you've looked at what skills each area of those 4 areas need, and then what you've done is you've taken each person and you've looked at currently where their skill sets are. Okay.
So let's actually contextualize it to the situations, because what's actually happening here is that the business are changing a key process with the way that they collect long-term loans from customers that have defaulted. As a result of this, they've actually expected that they're going to get a big backlash from their customers, and that customers can be really upset and angry. And so what they're actually expecting is that they're actually even expecting their staff are actually going to be dealt with a lot of stress as a result of increased workload, but also as a result of having to handle a lot of these disgruntled customers. Mm-hmm. So funnily enough, part one is kind of hidden in the question, because we sort of know what the little bits and pieces that we need to, what skills are starting to be required. We kind of know what we need to do in this sort of situation. Effectively, what we have to do is just lay that out and then determine where we are then in the mix, or what our staffing capabilities are in reference to those, I guess, to those skills or to those areas that we need a bit of help in.
And a big part of that is obviously they're also implementing a new IT system. Okay, so obviously that will be a big component of the skills audit itself. The introduction of a new IT system will basically determine a need for the extension of the skills audit, and you'll also note that those people that are currently existing or are currently, I think that are current debt collectors have not used the IT system, so there'll be a massive skills gap there that obviously in the next phase will therefore be addressed, and then the following phase will be implemented to be able to kind of reduce that gap there.
So what happens after that?
Okay, so what we now need to do is, I believe, I would generally tend to move on to a training needs analysis, but what we'll do is we'll do that as step 3. So step 2 is now so what I would do is, as an organisation, so I would do my organisational skills audit, And then obviously there is a very, very big need, and you're going to probably identify a really big need in addressing skill in a specific department, okay, which is the debt recovery department. So I would then refine my skills audit to reflect the specific needs of each department itself. And then what I would do in my last step is I would then look at a training needs analysis, which would then basically look at what training needs do I have to implement to be able to fill those skill gaps. Because my skills...
So, explain what the TNA is, the training need analysis. How is that different from skills audit?
Skills audit is just identifying skills that are required to perform a certain job function. Training needs analysis is really looking at what training needs I can use or I can implement to be able to fill those skill gaps.
Okay, so really the training needs analysis is looking at that skills audit, working out what we need and what our capabilities are, and really just analysing that gap between to determine what training needs are. Really.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. And that's a really simplified version of what a training needs analysis is. And if you've ever conducted a training needs analysis before, they are incredibly detailed documents. And if you've got a very, very big organisation that you do work for, this is a very, very strategic process to really, really help you, I guess, look at strategies in terms of developing your team members. You can't do a training needs analysis unless you have done a skills audit. You need to know first and foremost what skills are required for a specific role, and then you can build your training needs analysis on the results of that skills audit. And then you look at like implementation of training needs, timelines required, resources, outcomes and objectives of those types of training once you've implemented them as well. So that's really a big part of the training needs analysis too.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Are we happy to move on to the next question?
They are definitely not fun to do. I have done them on the odd occasion before in a previous role, and they are
training needs analysis.
Yeah, they are very, very detailed documents. Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. Do you want to continue on with that one, Dor, or are you happy to move on to the next one?
Yeah, let's move on if we can. Yeah.
Sure. So question 7, guys, what role does performance management play in creating a learning organisation? Now, it's really quite interesting. I mean, obviously we're talking about a learning organisation as one that's committed to development. It's one that's committed to upskilling, and that has put all those processes in place. Well, really, performance management is I guess the individual development. So you know, it's the process of managing somebody's performance, but on a one-to-one basis. So I guess in order to be able to effectively assist somebody and make sure that they're on the right track and that they're in the right place, and what your future looks like, actually part of when we talk about performance management, you know, we include things like performance appraisals as our the formal mechanisms, the formal methods of, you know, our performance management. One of the main things in a performance appraisal session is about development and creating a bit of a future plan for that particular employee. So understanding what an individual's future looks like and what they're aiming to achieve and go and do will absolutely shape, you know, what sort of development opportunities you put in place and how, you know, what sort of training that person might want or development that person might want or need. Also, the organisation might say, look, we're going to actually groom you for a particular role, so are you happy with that? Now, performance management is obviously about ironing out where that person wants to be and what they've got and so on and so forth. So, yeah.
I think
they're really closely,
performance management is definitely a strategy that organisations do need to embrace if they are committed to becoming a learning organisation. You know, like we've talked about previously, performance management is key and essential in looking at individuals, putting in place, as you mentioned, personal development plans, performance development plans, and all of those show your commitment, as you know, that great word that you used, show your commitment to development, to changing the thought process, changing ways we do things, which therefore contributes to growing that culture within that organisation that ultimately contributes to creating that learning organisation that we want.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, imagine the two weren't, imagine the two weren't linked at all. That performance management or performance appraisal and the learning organisation would be an example. The organisation does a wonderful performance appraisal, you've got great rapport with your direct supervisor, you're talking about different development opportunities, you sign off on some things, they're checking with you, that performance appraisal is done perfectly. Also, the organisation does their learning and their training beautifully, they do it really well, they communicate really well, they do skills analysis, they do all these things great, not a problem, and you find yourself invited into a training session about something which is completely irrelevant to where you're wanting to go and conversations that you've been having with your team leader about your own development. The two need to work together, is sort of what we're sort of saying here. So, you need to be aware when you're inviting people into different learning opportunities and you're running different training, you need to be aware of what their performance management, what their own development plans are looking like too, so that you're considering that as well. Otherwise they're not working too well. Alyssa?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yep. I think we've definitely covered that. I hope you've all got enough information to kind of draw from that with regards to that particular question. Yep.
Okay, so next question, question 8, is that we just want the guys to create a checklist of what good performance management is and what it is not. So there's a whole section in the learning material on this, guys. We're probably not going to go through it. But we need you to upload your answers into this file here, or you can actually just type them straight in if you want to do that. How many would you like to see here?
Create a checklist of what good performance management is and what it is not. I mean, I would probably like to see maybe six good qualities of performance management and maybe 6 not so good qualities of performance management.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I think that's great. It's certainly important. So, absolutely.
Cool.
Okay, next question, question 9.
Yes.
Gets the guys to complete a pro forma to create their own personal learning plan for either a member of their team, somebody that they're working with, or they can complete it for themselves. So you'll see the word pro forma is actually a hyperlink as I click over it. If you open that up, depending on the browser that you're using, of course, it'll actually open up the form, and there it is. So what you guys need to do, either put your name or put the name of the employer that you're working with. This is just as sort of a template or an example of what you might see in an organisation. So what we want you to do is actually come up with a list of 5 different, 5 different areas. So 5 different organisational goals that might exist. What does that break down into a team goal sense? And then what is the actual individual's goal? So what you're actually doing at this point is sort of, taking the company's sort of direction and operational goals and then breaking them down into these KPIs, these more manageable things that the employee can do. But if you look underneath, it actually talks about the strategy to achieving those goals, the outcomes, timelines, and resources for each of those goals. So there's a bit of a link to goal setting here. And look, as far as the organisation goals, they do not need to be SMART goals in this particular situation. So, you could just generically use, just sort of say, increasing market share or improving customer satisfaction, things like that. So that might be the first one, improve customer satisfaction. So the team goal is to achieve a high rating with all customers. Now how's that going to actually relate to a personal goal? 90% positive satisfaction on customer engagement survey, for example. Now when we look at the actual performance goal here, this is the goal that we're talking about. We know what our outcomes are, and the strategy is the important part here. So what we really want to see here is that what you're actually putting in place to help that particular person to achieve their goals. Now, I guess it's important to use this form guide because what we want to see here is that there's a linkage between the organisational goals and what the individual does. And a good organisation will have that nice synergy between the strategic goals, the operational goals, and obviously what the individuals are doing. And it's also important for an individual to see that, yes, that my development is very, very much in line with what the business needs as well. Because then you obviously feel like that you're a part, you're growing with the organisation, you're a part of that too. The most important thing for me is what goes into this. So what sort of things that you're going to lay out there to assist. You know, one or two things is fine, just a couple of ideas to help. And for this one, you might say that attend 3 customer service workshops. Okay, that's fine. So that's part of what we're actually going to do. We've got our own internal training. We're going to run workshops. So the strategy here and timeline. So by May 2015, whatever it might be, by May 2015, you're going to be actually attending 3 customer service workshops. Performance outcomes that you would have completed those courses. So complete each course or attend. Maybe all you have to do is attend because that's all that's required from you. And that's sort of what we want to see. We just want to see what your sort of strategies are and how you're actually going to help that individual achieve their personal goal, which we want to see is linked to the organisational goals. The team goals and the personal goals are going to be pretty close. Generally speaking, the team goal and a personal goal will almost be the same, just on a higher or lower number. So the team might have to hit 100 sales, and you're one of 10 members of the team, so your personal goal is to hit 10 sales a day. So quite often personal goals are just a smaller version of the team goals. Is there anything you want to add to question 9?
No, I mean, it seems like a little bit of a long activity, but it's kind of really going to help you assist and understand the relationship between all 3 elements of those, organisational team and your own personal goals. So, and you clearly demonstrated that in the way that you've done it. So it might seem like a long activity to do, but it's definitely beneficial.
Yeah, look, really we want to see the link between the organisational goals, between the individual goals, and then the development opportunities. So what are the strategies you're going to put in place to help them to get to that area? You will need to upload the document here, guys. So I'm sorry, I think I mentioned you can just type your answer here, but that's not the case. We need you to fill in that template. So save it, and then if you see where my mouse is, top left-hand box here, it has the word add. If you click on that, that's one way to actually add files. We'll bring up the file picker. Or you can do the old drag and drop, so you can actually just pick something up and drop it in like so. Whichever way you want to go about it, that's absolutely fine. But, please upload your response to question 1. Question 10. Now, it's okay, question 10 is actually a case study. I've actually got a copy of the case study in front of me. Would you like me to read that out? And then do you want to lead the way on this one?
Sure. You can also access the case study by just clicking on the link there. So, yeah.
Okay, so I might do that. I'll right-click on that and open it in a new link. So it opens up a PDF file, and there it is. There's your case study. And that's the whole thing. So let's read it out. So you are the clinical manager for a large team of 115 professionals that encompass doctors, nurses, physiotherapists, administration staff, cleaners, and catering staff. They all work in shift and have varying education levels. Some of the staff are newly arrived to Australia and English is their second language. Some are single parents and others are contract staff working for multiple organisations. Your hospital has recently been audited by the Health Standards Authority and there is a range of aspects that it has scored particularly well on, but also a small number that have been identified as needing improvement. You have been asked by the organisation's management to put together a project team representing your department in order to promulgate the good practice throughout the rest of the organisation and to identify a process to improve the action areas. Can you, okay, so yeah, the last thing, so yeah, you need to, these are the 5 little dot points, convey the results of the audit to all staff. This is what you need to do. Make them aware of areas of good practice. advise them of areas needing improvement. It's actually important that you put both of those in there. Alert them to the strategy being used to look at future procedures, i.e. the project team, and call for nominations to participate in the project team as well. So these are the four things, 5 things.
Yep.
Which you'll be needing to do.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. Is there a couple of questions, though, that are associated with that? I think there's a couple of questions that the assessment's specifically asking.
Okay, so number 1,
Yep.
what we're actually asking you to do here is describe how you will ensure that all of your staff get information that is needed by the organisation in a manner that facilitates their understanding, encourages participation, and minimises disruption to hospital operations.
Yep.
So 1.
So that's the very first part of it. Yep. So what we're looking at, you want to, go for number 2?
I'll just, number 2. How could knowing your employees' preferred learning styles be a benefit to the employee of the organisation? So that's a question relating to learning styles.
Yep.
Do you want to?
Yeah, of course. I guess what we're looking at here is describe how you can ensure that all of your staff get the information that is needed by the organisation. Okay, so there is specific areas where the case study has requested that you provide information. I think one of them was the results of the actual audit itself. Is that right? You also, it's hard to bring up the case study at the same time as actually the question. So what you want to do, obviously, is okay, beautiful, cool. So what you need to do is you need to relay certain bits of information. So you need to, first of all, make the results of the audit available to all staff, and you need to also make them aware of areas of good practice and areas where they need environment and need improvement, and alert them to the strategy being looked at future procedures, and call for nominations to participate in the project team. So what are ways that you can therefore communicate the results of the audit to the team? How can you make people aware of good practice? And remember, there's a couple of requirements there. You want to make sure that everybody understands the information that's being presented with minimal disruption, I think, to the actual to the hospital operations itself. But at the same time, you also have to bear in mind, and as it clearly states, that some of the staff are from different are at different levels. Some of them are doctors, some of them are nurses, some of them are physiotherapists, administration staff, cleaners and catering staff. So one of the big things you have to kind of look at is when you're relaying information about this, it's really important to look at the different levels within the organisation. Because that's really going to determine how you can communicate or relay this type of information or call for this information as well. The second part, obviously, is also not only have you got different people from varying levels within the organisation, but people that have also got varying educational levels, and people that have there's a lot of diversity there. So English is a second language, some are single parents. So there's a lot that you're working with. This is not simply issuing a memo to the whole team to tell them the results of an audit, okay? This is about really looking at who your staff are, understanding what their learning needs are, and communicating the way and in giving them the information that they need that is specific to to them as individuals, I guess. Yeah, and like think about some of the requirements that you might have, or some of the different types of people. You know, maybe you might choose to issue memos or emails to certain levels of the staff, but perhaps you might also need to look at you know, other types of visual ways to communicate to staff. Because, you know, it's a little bit easier to understand because of their learning styles. You know, a lot of doctors might like the whole concept of seeing data, so therefore they want to see specific audit results themselves, so they actually want to see that information, that analytical information, but other people might not. You know, people might not be available if you are giving a briefing or if you want to hold a meeting, so how do you communicate to those people that perhaps aren't available if you do decide to have a briefing? So what are the different options you could take to be able to relay this type of information? If you say, let's pop out a memo and everybody can read it, then you're really not addressing the individual needs of the actual organisational members themselves.
Now, I think the key is here, guys, that's not something that you can just do in one shot. This is a
Yep,
big,
exactly.
there's a big thing. There's been an audit where we've decided that we've discovered there's some clear areas that we need to work on, and we've done some good things as well. It's important to recognise those good things. But this is just not something that you're just going to, in one flick, just handle. You know, you're going to communicate to a range of different people that have a range of different levels of understanding and experience and background, and even some of your staff are newly arrived to Australia, and English is their second language too. So we want to see that you're considering a range of different ways to actually make sure that you're communicating that message, and that you're promoting that engagement of all, of all of your staff to be involved, because it's important that all staff are involved.
Yeah, I would like to ideally see you breaking down all the individual team members, the areas of your team, and really looking at how you could communicate and maybe even why you chose to communicate that particular way. Also remember that there is an element of that also needs you to call for nominations to participate in the project team. So if you were looking at people that were, and you were needing to communicate that to some of the staff members that had newly arrived and English is their second language, how do you call for nominations from their perspective to be able to get their engagement for that and their buy-in for that process? So I would like to see, looking at the different types of team members, I'd like to have a look at the different educational levels and just the different backgrounds of people and how, and how you would choose to communicate that type of information.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So yeah, as long as you cover those 5 points there, I think you'll be okay. There's a second part to this as well, which was talking about learning styles, and the question is how knowing the employee's preferred learning styles can benefit to you, also to them and the organisation. So make sure that you demonstrate to us that talk about the benefit of understanding somebody's learning style, but what the benefit is to you. When we say you, we're talking about somebody who's in charged with, organising training for somebody, the employees, so them, and the company as a whole. To make sure that when you're answering questions too, that you cover each of those 3 areas.
Yeah.
Anything else?
No, I mean, and it's in the next question, what you'll do is you'll probably, the next question starts to talk about the learning styles as well. So it's going to ask you to think about your own learning style and kind of do a little test about that. But obviously it's really important that you consider each and every person, because as we spoke about before, everybody's very different, unique, and they have different processes in how they learn. If you're building a learning organisation and you're building a learning culture, that doesn't mean that you just expect that people will learn the same way. Everybody is different, unique, individual, so you embrace and you address and you approach those differences and those uniquenesses, and you cater for those because they're as much a part of your team as anybody else is. There's no person that's higher than another person. Everybody contributes equally to the success of an organisation, and you need to consider everybody when you're trying to communicate information.
So when you're filling out this form, guys, just put your immediate response. Don't spend too long reading the questions. We just want you to your initial gut feeling, straight feeling, first response. So when you study for a test, you would rather read notes, read the headings in the book, look at the diagrams, illustrations, or have someone ask you questions, repeat it back silently to yourself, or write things on an index card, make multiple diagrams. Just put your answer that comes straight to mind, so don't think about it too long. There's, I think, 15, 20, 16 questions, and then just put your totals in the bottom here, and that'll actually then tell you which learning style, and talk a little bit about each of those learning styles underneath.
Cool.
And then just upload your response in here, and that's all you need to do to complete that question. Question 12. Now this is the remainder of I think there's 3 more questions, 12, 13, 14. These are reflective questions for the students, is that right?
Yes, that's correct, yes.
Beautiful. So question 12 reads, have you ever participated in a training program which has enthused you and helped you develop ideas for creating productivity and or building better relationships in the workplace?
Yep.
What happened when you tried to put these ideas into practice at work? Did you meet so many obstacles that you just gave up? Why do you think this happened? How did it make you feel?
Yep.
Okay, so there's a few components to this one.
Definitely, there is a few components, and it does cause you to kind of have to think about a training program that perhaps you attended or were a part of. And once you've left the training program, you're fueled with these unbelievable ideas about how to increase your productivity and how to build better relationships in the workplace. Then tell us about that process. Like, what happened when you went back into the workplace? So you're fueled and you're passionate and you've got so many awesome ideas from this particular training program. Then you've gone to go back in the workplace to be able to implement it. Did you have any obstacles that stood in your way? Why did you think obstacles popped up, and how did those obstacles make you feel? So it is just really a personal reflection of an experience that you've had when it comes to really, like, in all of us have done it. We've left a training program, we've gone, oh my gosh, that's so awesome, and then you get into the workplace and you try and implement it. Sometimes people are very resistant to change or doing things very differently. So sometimes obstacles can pop up.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, for guys that maybe haven't gone through a formal training and or induction program through their workplace, a couple of ways that you can answer this one, I would have thought. You can actually, you can use an informal sort of structured program. So if you went and you started working on site somewhere, on a construction site, and you had somebody that was, whether it was sort of a formal or informal arrangement where somebody was really, I guess, supervising you or leading you or helping you out with your questions, you can use that as your example. So really what we're talking about is where have you had a situation where you effectively had to go through that learning process, where somebody has effectively assisted you or a program's been there to assist you, whether it's informal or formal. Now, what happened when you tried to put some of those things that you learned into practice? So when you first started doing it, first physically acted on that learning, did you meet any obstacles? Why did you think that happened? How does it make you feel? So just answer those sort of things. We really just want to know how, I guess, we want to see a degree of reflection here. That's what we're looking for. So if you sort of say, like, didn't feel anything, nothing happened, all was good, it's not a really good reflection. So if you say that everything was great, that's cool. Just reflect on why you think it was good better. So if everything was rosy, then reflect on the situation, reflect on the environment, reflect on the actual training program. What was it about the training program that you thought was effective, and why do you feel that it worked for you? So it's all about the reflection of this question. Make sure that you're really digging into the question rather than just answering the surface. So if you only answer the surface, I put the things into practice, I found it was fine, no dramas, that's not really answering, that's not really reflecting. I want you to go in and ask yourself, why did I feel that way? Why do I think it was good? Why do I think it was bad? They're the sort of questions that you effectively need to ask yourself.
Yeah, I think we should. I think we should definitely move on.
Okay. Question 13.
Okay. So question 13 and question 14 are both, again, reflective type of questions. So it says, reflect on an organisation that you are familiar with. Do the procedures of this organisation help or hinder the learning and development of individuals, and why? So this one might require you to think back to an experience where you have perhaps worked for an organisation, and for you to really think about, I guess, the procedures within that organisation. Did the procedures, encourage learning and development of individuals, or were there no procedures in place? So therefore it did the opposite of encouraging individuals to learn and develop. Procedures obviously are a part of almost kind of like that operational plan behind a strategy. Those are the things and the processes that really encourage and support the direction of an organisation. So having learning and development procedures is quite important. Like, that's showing you that commitment the organisation has to their team members as well. And it's written in stone, it's there, it's updated regularly, it's showing a commitment and it's guaranteeing that. So again, I guess just drawing on your experiences of an organisation that you have worked with previously, and just having a bit of a review of the procedures and whether or not they worked and there was procedures out there that kind of promoted that learning and development.
So just to change the reword it, I guess it's what we're sort of asking is reflect on a company that you may be aware of, familiar with. Okay, so is the company committed to the development of its individuals? And what we'll do is use examples to explain why, and that'll sort of cover that sort of terminology of procedures and things like that. So what are the things that they're doing? Demonstrate that, explain. So use an example to highlight it. So say, okay, the company does this, this, and this. I really don't know that they are really committed to the development because of this, this, and this. Or, oh, absolutely, yeah, the company is doing this, this, and this. And therefore, I would suggest that yes, they are, they are committed to development, and they're committed to helping the learning and development of individuals versus hindering. Are you happy with that?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Again, it is a reflection of, it's just getting you to consider the whole concept of the importance of the procedures supporting that learning organisation and that culture that hopefully you've been driven to, that you're driving towards, I should say. All right.
Another uploading question here. So question 14 is the last one in the set. Undertake some research into the knowledge and skills held by the following learning and development specialist roles. What functions do they typically undertake in organisations? So we want you just to explain, we want you to do a bit of research into each of these different roles that we've listed here.
Yep.
And it's important in knowing how these roles are and how they sort of relate in terms of a learning organisation. So the first thing to do is to undertake some research and try and work out what the different roles are. Now, how would you suggest the guys might do a bit of research on that?
Oh, look, you can definitely, like, you might be in an organisation where you have these particular positions, so therefore you might use the networks, or you might have a bit of a chat to people. There are also the likes of Adam and I as well as part of your networks, because we are workplace trainers and we are workplace assessors. So, hopefully it'd give you an idea of what we do. So you could potentially answer question 3 and 4. Also, I mean, you can always do some research on the definition of what each of these particular positions are. You might have friends, as I said before, that might be in these roles or might work in organisations that can help give you a bit of an understanding of what each of these positions do. You can use the internet to assist you. There's lots of definitions as to what these are. They're available to you.
Have a look at the job descriptions. It's probably the easiest way to do it. Have a look at Seek. I mean, look, we definitely we definitely embrace you to have a look at your own learning departments and have a chat, as you've mentioned, also have a chat to the guys and see what they're doing there. But these are sort of broad terms or position or job roles. Really, they're sort of broad sort of terms. So if you do go on and do a bit of a Seek search or have a look at the job descriptions of those particular job titles, you'll see that there's some there's some skills and personal qualities that are listed there, and the background knowledge required for that. So yeah, interesting. So yeah, we want to know what sort of function they typically undertake. So just give us a bit of an explanation of what their role is in the organisation.
Yep.
So training, learning, development manager. Okay, a training and learning development manager is responsible for blah, 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 and is generally in charge with doing X, Y, and Z. Some of the skills and knowledge required by a training, learning, development manager is the following: 1, 2, 3, and then do the next for each of the 4 on there.
Yep.
Are you happy with that? Now, there's a little box here for uploading again. You're more than welcome to use like a Microsoft Word document and upload it.
Yep.
Obviously, you've got a lot more. Yeah, you've got a lot more options in terms of formatting if you use Microsoft Word and upload it. If you want to just type your answers into the box, that's okay too.
Yep.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I think that actually wraps up this session today. Is that correct?
Yes, that wraps up this particular session, Adam. Yeah.
Okay, beautiful, guys. Thanks very much for your attendance. We'll be taking care of the sections 2 and 3 next week. I believe that might be, we're not 100% sure on the timeline, so we'll actually communicate that to you in the next 24 hours. We'll send out a schedule of these sessions for next week, but we'll be taking through Section 2, Facilitate and Promote Learning, and Section 3, and then the following week we'll be taking through the assessments for this unit, the subject. There are 4 assessments in total for this subject, and we'll take you through all those on the 3rd and final session in 2 weeks' time. So just 3 sessions. This is part 1 of 3. Thank you very much for your attendance, and thanks very much for tuning in. We look forward to seeing you next time.
See you later, everybody.